Welcome to part 17 of my building Flying Dutchman, and it is obvious I've made a lot of progress. I've got rigging on my mind. I'm totally enveloped in trying to get the lines correct. For the most part I have, but it is quite the challenge. I enjoy it. I hope you do too if you decide to build this ship. But it is going to tax your brain and your patience as well as your fine motor skills to get the lines run. It does follow an outline and it is helpful, but it was confusing. So I'll go into details on that in this particular episode. Anyway, let me give you a close-up flyover of the ship, and then I'll go into the details and things I ran into. I'm coming to you from the future. In other words, I'm inserting this at the beginning so that it'll eliminate some of the confusion that I ran into during the build. And you can tell that I'm well into the build by how much beeswax I've used on the rigging lines. What I'm going to try and clarify is how all this rigging works. I've finally figured it out. When you get to the first page, you'll go to whatever this number is. This is the last page, but it's JT77. That's where you start. You come over to JT77 and you follow these tie lines, and then you go to the tie down point. Then on a separate sheet, you'll find where for example, JT77, you'll find a drawing of the ship, and you'll find that where it marks what belaying pin that goes to. Where it gets confusing is JT77, that's the only one on this drawing. That's because this is the rear mast. It only has the one sail. When you get to JT78, notice there are two sails. That would be the bowsprit and those two sails that are up there, but it doesn't say that here. That's what gets confusing. Then what gets more confusing, this center one represents the main mast and the mizzen mast because they have three sails. You still go in order of the numbers here, but for example, when you get to JT80, JT81, and JT82, they are in order because that is that particular sail. But it doesn't tell you which one of the sails it is. You look at, here, I'll get it down. You can kind of figure it out when you find, for example, here's JT82. Well, it's right below the foremast, so it would be starting at the foremast. Then 83, 84, and 85 will end up being the main mast. But there's no indication on this which mast is which. You have to determine it by where do those go into the belaying pins. Here's a good example of what I was talking about, and this is late in the build. I'm going fast forward because I finally figured this out pretty well. So I identified this 80, JT80, as being the foremast by checking out that number and found that it secures at the base of the foremast. See these 3 lines, there's not much instruction, so that represents 3 pieces of rigging attached to that sail at about that point. Then I tied a knot. Then you go up and there's a single block that was pre-installed, earlier in the build. So you go to that block, then there's another block up higher, and these were all there, so I did do that correctly. And then you run down to where JT80 goes, which is at the base of the foremast. Let me show you that on the ship so you get an idea of what that looks like. So here's that area, that's the 3 lines. I've sewn them in place, but they're not attached. These could be pulled tighter. So once I get the line secured, I will pull these snug and then put a little dab of CA glue on the back to hold them, maybe a little knot also. This is where they knotted together. So it goes to a single line to that single block, which was there from earlier construction. Then if I swing around here, you can see that line go right here and goes up right to that single block that was there. So I installed those right. And then this loose line will go down to the very base of the foremast and secure with one of the belaying pins that's down there. I know that's confusing. It was confusing for me. I did not get them all in the right places, but now that I've finished, I do understand how this outline works. Shame I didn't completely figure it out until a little bit late in the build. I use everything from tweezers to various sizes of clamping scissors to little grabbing tools that I've purchased. I have a variety of these. And then probably what I use the most is this that I made by just taking a simple dowel, drilling a small hole. Those are copper wires. Then I soldered the copper wires, and hopefully you can see I made a little U-shaped portion in there, and I actually took a small file and kind of smoothed it out because you don't want any sharp edges because you have to slide off of it. And I used that to push the rigging behind the belay pins. So that's come in very handy. It's fairly long. You can begin to see the amount of rigging line that I have run. And I'm not going to bore you with showing you the tedious work that it takes to run them, but if you follow the numbered sequence, it will help keep you a little bit out of your own way and helps you not get them all tangled up quite as much. Here's something that I would have done differently, and I'm actually pulling this out and changing it. This is plan sheet E Edward, and when I got over to this segment, there's a block here, and all these blocks will need to be started out at a tie point. You can see it's right there. These I put on with regular rope, and you have to be able to get under the rope, and it just works much better if you use wire because you can make a little loop there easier than you can with the threads that are required. So I've pulled it off. I will remake this with wire. This is the rear mizzen mast, and you can see my clamping scissors and see how it's having me start from the center working outward on the belay pins. And that's the schedule that you need to have. You need to have some sort of a game plan so that you don't get all twisted up. Your lines really should not rub against each other. They can cross sometimes, but they really should not rub. Now some, we're not talking me being a perfectionist here, so sometimes mine don't turn out perfect. Any stray rope that you see laying around, I'll clip those off, and then I've got a way that I will make rope that will hang off of each of the belay pins to make it look like the extra rope has been wrapped up. You might notice that I have removed both the lifeboat the grating there and some of the other things on the main deck, just so I have more room and less risk of breaking something off. I'll put them back in place once all the lines are run. What you're looking at are my sails after they have been aged. Right now they're kind of drying. I steamed them so they will have the shape that I want. Let me show you that process. Early this past winter, I took the sail material that came with the ship. I buried it outside in a flower garden. It was a rich peat soil, and this one deteriorated the most. I still plan on using it. This one has some odd coloration to it, and I can always darken this some using some paint or something, but you get an idea on the aging. This turned out pretty well. See the holes that have rotted in that. And I was a little surprised at how quickly it did deteriorate. Now, the shape is not good. So let me show you on this particular piece. This happens to be landscape fabric, and I used that on the black pearl, but this time I'm going to try and use the actual cloth sails. So I'm going to use that to help shape the sail. Unfortunately, as I was working on this, I failed to hit record, so I didn't record it. So I'll kind of redo it somewhat, but you can already tell I've gotten a lot of the crinkliness out. But this very fragile area, the steam will bring it back so that you can reposition those fibers close to where they originally were. And the steam allows me to not only get rid of the wrinkles, it allows me to give it the curvature that I want to have. Now, here in a few minutes, I will take this over to a towel drying rack, and I will lay it over that and let it completely dry. This portion that's extremely deteriorated, I can patch this up if I want to. I haven't decided yet. I'm going to see how well I can get it to adhere together when I put it on the ship with the rigging lines. I do like that look. It's just a little bit too deteriorated. Here these are on this drying rack. That's one of the sails, and you can see it has that little curve to it that I want to attain. Here's a small one. This particular one is exactly what I was trying to attain. So you can see that it has some holes in it. Exactly what I was looking for. See the curvature that I have? It'll help maintain that on the ship. Special note, this rigging that loops around the yard arm, and I took a needle and put it through the top of the sail. That has a unique number, and let me show you on the plans. When you come across it on the very first sail that you do, it's marked JT57, so you can see the JT57 and the thread that you use. However, when you go to any new sails, it does show the JT57. See, they're all listed there, but when you go down here, you'll not find it. So you need to remember from that very first page, the very first sail that you did, that you'll need to do that on all the sails. It makes sense, but I was looking on here to see the length, and you're only given that instruction on the very first page of sails. The proper way for the rigging to end on a belaying pin, and I'm hoping you can see this. I couldn't do it everywhere, but if you can see, this rope is going under the last loop, and to get in and pull this without having my hand in front of the camera is next to impossible. I'm hoping you can see this tighten up. And now with this string being under that, that locks it in place. And I was not able to do that everywhere, but any place that I can, where I can reach, that is how I finish the belaying pins. I do go back, and to secure it for sure, I put a little drop of CA glue. Give you an idea of where I'm at, and there is a massive amount of rigging lines on this particular ship, more than I have ever done. It can get very confusing, and I don't even think I can completely explain it, but I am working through it, and I don't know that unless you make one, you can't appreciate the amount of work that goes into it. So I'm continuing on. Sorry, I'm not giving detailed instructions. It's a massive amount of figuring out where things go. As I'm doing this wrap that holds the sail onto the yard, just to give you an idea, I took this measurement across here and then more than doubled it to get the right amount of thread. So you'll have to figure out the measurement yourself. And then there's a stitching on the sail, so I put one there and then one in between, and just work all the way down the sail. What I've done is put some rolled up paper or paper towels behind most of the sails, and then I took the steamer and steamed it. I'm hoping that when I remove the paper, it'll also help them maintain that curved shape, like they're getting a little bit of breeze. This particular sail I decided to tie up for two reasons. It's the one that was rotted the most, and it was just hanging down very low, and I want to be able to see the deck of the ship more than my rotted out sails. Every once in a while you'll run into the crow's nest being in the way, and it shouldn't rub against the crow's nest. So find an opening that goes directly down, and you can feed it through. But again, you have to make sure you don't get tangled up in other lines. I'm not tangled in any other lines. I'm good to go. So now I can just work my way down all the way to the deck. I'm having to correct an error that I did pretty much on every mast, and it concerns this area here and this deadeye. It looked to me like it was coming off the center, and in reality, because there are two, one on each end, this is the deadeye that's on the end of the yard arms. So I had tied a new deadeye thinking I missed it, but they actually were there. So I'm having to redo those. I'll show you on the ship. Here's the corrected version. It goes from the outside to this rope area, back, and then down to the ship. I had gone to the center and out. So it's important that you get a grasp of what those instructions mean, because each one is a duplicate. So even though it looks like it was coming from the center, it was really illustrating the two ends of the yard arms. This concludes part 17 of my building the Flying Dutchman. I think probably the next episode will be the final version, and I also will discuss what my next project will be. This is Boiler Dan 1, and as always, thanks for watching.